want to dive into the conversation of ICT and the Big Four agenda. Allow me to introduce my panel this morning. Sitting closer to me, I have Chris Senanu. He's the Managing Director for Telecom. On my far end, I have John Sergon. He is the CEO of ICT Authority. Gentlemen, it's so good to have you with us here this morning. Before we can jump into ICT and even the Big Four agenda, Chris, let me begin with you. Paint for me an image of how far we've come over the past 10 years when it comes to ICT infrastructure in Kenya.
Oh, we've come very far, Zinzi. Well, exactly about 10 years ago is when the fiber optics came. But if you want to look at what telecommunication or even the internet felt like or looked like in Kenya, it was pretty slow. Of course, we were much faster than the rest of the sub-region. But in terms of infrastructure, in terms of national layout of fiber optic, in terms of just having capacity, the cables coming to Kenya, we didn't have any of that. So we were somewhere, but we were far back from where we are today. Today we are miles and miles ahead. I'm sure John will say the same.
John, but a lot of work still needs to be done?
Indeed.
Please point out for me some of those loopholes.
Okay, I mean, part of the reason why we've come this far is based on the infrastructure that started about 2008, 2009, when the cable arrived, undersea cable. But as you said, across the country right now, the large parts of the country that are not covered. And we as a government, we're working pretty much to cover all the counties, sub-counties, so that this development continues the way it has been.
Then paint for me an image of how far that is currently on the ground. You're working towards it. How far have you and your team come to making sure that Kenyans, even in those areas that you just mentioned, can receive internet, given that in this day and age that we're in, internet is a necessity? Okay.
The government started a program called NOFB, National Optic Fiber Infrastructure, which has been going on from the last 10 years or so. And working together with the players in the sector, Telcom, Safaricom, Jamii, we've extended from all the counties, and a large number of sub-counties now are covered. But it's not just the government. Where the government is not reaching, the private sector has filled that part. And where the private sector does not get, then we've covered ourselves. But I can say now we've actually gone all these counties, sub-counties with the fiber. Nearly all the sub-counties.
Basically, if I'm to chip into that, let's take Wanjiko, Acheng, or Nilainte, who's in the Mashinane, in the village, and they need to be able to access government services. So people like Telcom come in to help enable by providing last mile to ensure that citizen can actually access government services. So we've come far, but there's still pockets of areas where there's little to no connectivity, which has to be covered. But if you look at most of the key towns in all 47 counties and the sub-counties, they're pretty much covered with services.
All right, let me paint for your viewers an image of how it is that internet is quite popular here in Kenya, to just echo the sentiments of our guest. 7 million, that's the number of Kenyans on Facebook. 12 million are on WhatsApp, or rather using WhatsApp, and 4 million of you Kenyans are on Instagram. 1,000 express Wi-Fi hotspots are within the country. So, Kristen, my next question would be perhaps, then what are some of the challenges that are ailing Kenyans, or rather Kenya, and the government to make sure that internet is reaching those people that you're talking about, the Wanjiko?
Well, you still have to get more Wi-Fi hotspots. We still have to get GSM of 3G and 4G all across. So the last mile challenge still is there. The second one would be sometimes the infrastructure. We still have a bit of challenge with companies that go cutting cables out as they do construction. And so we need more robust redundancy. Ultimately, the more people who can have devices which can connect, that's also another thing, because the pricing of devices is coming down. It's come down very much in the last 10 years, but still you have people down there who may not be able to afford a smart device. So pricing on devices, infrastructure, and of course pricing, the pricing on connectivity. As you know, there's just been the new tax which has come, which is going on to...
And we're coming to that.
And so, therefore, it's going to push up the price of internet for a bit. But, I mean, I think overall, in terms of the ecosystem, it's between the public and the private sector, we come together to try our very best to enable ICT in the country. Kenya is very, very far from its neighbor countries when it comes to telecommunication and ICT. We're still ahead.
Sergan, perhaps the role that ICT has in making sure the Big Four agenda is delivered to Kenyans?
Okay, I guess first of all, the role of the government as it is to provide enabling environment, policy-wise, make sure that things are in place. But in addition to that, we also actually do infrastructure development. We do, in fact, you've just talked about reaching out there, but also the issue of capacity. And the ministry, our ministry, and also the ICT authority is mandated to make sure that the Wanjiku out there is able to get the training and building the capacity it requires to access and use these devices. We've got a master plan that spells out how that goes all the way to reaching the lowest levels of our communities.
And Chris, being within the private sector, do you generally think that the government is doing that, promoting an ecosystem to enable ICT to thrive in Kenya?
100%. In terms of ICT, so we do have quite a lot of bodies that we use to engage the government. ICTA itself is a very open body. We regularly have quarterly meetings either through KEPSA, which is the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and or directly. But I think the one thing that has always been there, and definitely since the new CS, Joe Musheru, came in, is that we have consultative forums where we talk about specific, how does ICT plug into the Big Four agenda. But let me digress for 1 second. The team you had here before was talking about education and policing education. I feel a lot of this, 1.9 billion for that, we could use technology. You know, there will always be kids who are susceptible to wanting to cheat in exams. But if you use technology properly, we're able to eliminate a lot of it. And we will not need to spend 1.9 billion. True. So that's one way that technology or ICT comes in terms of enabling government to achieve its objectives.
Nevertheless, Chris, remember when the same government said that they're going to give free laptops to all schools? Fine, fantastic idea. But then critics were saying, how do you give free laptops and Wi-Fi, of course, which will need Wi-Fi, to students who are doing and in class on the floor? They don't have a proper roofing. Lack of priorities there.
Not necessarily. I think what's going to happen is that in 10 years' time after the free laptop program and the program he's talking about, which is the DLP, where they are training, building capacity of the youth, we will be sitting back and saying, oh, wow, the Kenyan youth or the Kenyan population is highly, highly literate. Not only we are very highly literate, but we're now technologically literate. And that's where the jobs are going to come. We're going to be able to have a lot of people employed. So you're looking at it from one point of view and saying, okay, the priorities look like they are wrong, but actually enabling those youths, enhancing their skills will make sure that they have a brighter future. Right. So at the end of the day, there's another government ministry that has to deal with the infrastructure in terms of building the classroom and the rest. But when it comes to technology, if we don't enable our kids with technology now, we're going to be back in the old ages. Technology is the one thing that has made the world flat, and we in Kenya or in this region, we need to ensure that our kids are on that level.
Right, all right. John, would you like to add on top of that?
I think there's sometimes a misconception about this priority issue, because you remember when President Kennedy took over in the 1960s in the United States, he said, we want to put somebody in the moon in 10 years. And he left it there. And in fact, sure enough, it was done. What has happened with the government is that they are putting in place this vision, say we want the kids to be trained with kids of tomorrow. That does not mean necessarily that if we do that, the infrastructure goes down. I mean, the buildings and so forth. But as Chris has said, what is the price of not doing that? What we have done now, we've just planted a seed. And I can assure you that in 10 years from today, 15 years from today, we will say this is the best thing we would have done. Mm-hmm. Because even if we don't spend in technology, I don't think the classroom will be much, much better. In fact, by the way, look at the issue of power, provision of power. We've been talking about power as a country since independence. But it's only when laptops were introduced into classrooms that power got in every class. And in fact, also, if you want to think about it, there is no class now that will have devices without a classroom. So you will find that actually the idea of technology sparse the infrastructure much, much faster than it has been.
All right, so Mr. Sagon, just paint for me a proper image, even for our viewers, how it is that ICT will play in the role in the Big Four agenda, but this way, specifically within the food sector, within housing.
Okay. In fact, when the President announced the Big Four agenda, we as a ministry and ICT authority in particular have put in place initiatives in each of the sectors. If you look at the agriculture, for example, food security, what is happening now that we've come up with initiatives that captures database of every farmer in the country. And that way, we are able to then manage the food industry and make sure that the markets, for example, from the farmer to the market, the farmers get the best out of the industry.
Let me jump into that.
Yes.
So if you take agriculture, for example, like you start from the farm to fork. So you want to know how many farmers are doing maize, how many are doing wheat, how many of them are planting yams or whatever. So that's step one. Step two, remember there's a whole value chain. They need fertilizer, they need information. So it's about creating these databases and pockets of, we have X amount of potato farmers, we are looking at this yield, or there's been a problem somewhere, transferring that information. So a lot of it is information flow and database which can help the government on planning. If you take, for example, the issue of housing, yesterday there was a chat going on Twitter about use of blockchain. The challenge we've had...
coming to that, yes.
The challenge we've had in the past is that you have national housing comes up, builds 400,000 houses, and then there's always opaqueness in the way the houses are distributed. Who gets it? How do we make sure that it is not the politicians who go getting 10 or 15 of them at one go? And so we're going to use technology in terms of, first of all, this you've applied for a house in this area and that is where you stay, and we make sure that you are located at, and it's not some politician getting 10 houses, waiting 2 years and then selling off 9 of them.
And Chris, do you believe with the blockchain system, especially now within the ICT sector, our CS Joe Misheru has an entire blockchain task force whose mandate is to do that. And we know blockchain can even solve some of the solutions, e.g. corruption, because it's a public ledger. Do you think that genuinely it will happen? Because it's one thing to have these things on paper and they look fantastic.
It's not about thinking. It's about knowing that it will. Well, you see, transparency creates visibility, which creates accountability. The challenge we have in several things is that there's no transparency. And the one thing that blockchain does is transparency, because you have a copy of the ledger, so does he and so do I. Right. So we're reading from the same script. You can't say I'm seeing red 24 when we are all, both of us can see, and we can put it on, the evidence is there.
And the problem is also implementation. Kenya, we have fantastic ideas, great on paper. When it comes to implementation, that's a different challenge.
I think implementation challenge is a challenge of people, the political will. Once the political will is there, it will get done. And believe me, when it comes to ICT, I don't think there's anybody who has political will and direction more than our CS.
All right, gentlemen, let's...
I was just going to say, I mean, implementation, I mean, if you have nothing to implement, for example, it's very different from having something. Yeah? So we have an array of all these things, and I'm sure the implementation part is a small thing, I mean, of the whole chain. Yeah. All right. I just wanted to add that, I mean, the whole sector, the whole big four areas, but I mean, if you look at the affordable health, for example, we've programs working together with NHIF, where we will identify people all the way to the grassroots. That way, then you will be able to give each individual what you're calling the universal health care. And that technology can do very quickly.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about the big elephant in this room,
yes.
Data bundles and the data connectivity, given the same government now is taxing us on that same issue. I read out for you the number: 7 million Kenyans are on Facebook, 12 million use WhatsApp, 4 million Kenyans are on Instagram, 1,000 express Wi-Fi hotspots in the nation. Chris, when this a statement came from the government, and then here they are, and they're taxing now Kenyans to use data bundles. A lot of these numbers that I've given, it's young people who use this social media. A lot of them also use it for their businesses, for SMEs on top of that. Now the government takes it and makes it more difficult to do that. We've seen recently one of your competitors having to increase their prices on data bundles and give the expense to Kenyans. Don't you not think that will infringe on the growth within the industry, within the telecommunication system?
So, Zinzi, as you know, taxes are broad across. These taxes are not only affecting ICT, they're affecting all other industries. And yes, technology should be looked at, just like I guess there was a big uproar on when the fuel price tax went up, because fuel affects the base of commodities moving again from the farm and transportation and a lot of things. So yes, it is sad to see a tax being levied on an enabler, because I think we have to look at it from a point of view that ICT is an enabler. But then again, we want better roads. We want better security. And so therefore, and the government needs the taxes. I think the challenge we are having is, again, when it's collected, how is it used? Do we get the transparency? And so therefore, I don't think Kenyans will mind paying tax X if they are sure they're going to get service from that tax. So I think we need to start focusing on how is the money spent and ensuring that when there's corruption, we actually deal with it properly.
Right.
I think that's the challenge. So yes, a lot of businesses, SMEs, are going to have to watch out how they spend their money on they're going to be more cautious. It might end up with a bit of a slowdown in the short term. But in the long term, I think we want to remember something. We came from a point of $600 per meg. That was actually the price of connectivity exactly in 2008, before the fiber optic cables came in. And we as a country have actually benefited along on pricing coming down, almost down to $30 a meg right now. And so we are still, if you take the price of internet in Kenya or connectivity or data bundles, it's actually cheaper than if you were in South Africa. That's just the fact. It's even cheaper than if you're in the UK. And so we're still better off. We're not as good as we were last week before the taxes, but we're still better off. And I do believe the industry is going to innovate. The industry is going to find ways of ensuring that people actually get what they want.
So you think, especially for SMEs, they would have to downsize in order to survive this period? Because at the end of the day, a lot of entrepreneurs, young people, again, I have to emphasize, are the ones who are at the heart of this matter. We're the ones who consume a lot of data bundles, be it for social purposes, but even for business aspects as well.
I think people will always do what they have to do to make sure that their businesses grow. That's what I believe. I think there might have to be cuts in other places of the business, but people, if you need that connectivity to get your business, you will use it.
All right, as closing comments, Mr. Sergun, perhaps tell me about the Connected Kenya Summit, what it's all about and what it can do for Kenyans.
Okay, thank you very much. The Connected Kenya Summit, which is coming up from Monday, Wednesday to Wednesday next week, is a summit that has been taking place the last 10 years under the Ministry of ICT and the ICT Authority in particular. And this is about coming together, the policymakers, the leaders in the industry, innovators, academia, coming together in one roof, under one roof, to discuss the developments of today and tomorrow.
Is this the first time this event is happening?
No, certainly not 10 years.
Yeah.
This is the 10th year.
And it has been successful in what you plan to do?
Pretty much, very much. It has been taking place, by the way, in the coastal city of Mombasa the last 9 years. This is the first time it's coming to Nairobi, and it will be taking place in Bomas.
And it has borne fruit. Those 10 years.
It has borne fruits. We've come up with many initiatives. What you are seeing now in the industry, Huduma centers, e-citizens, the Presidential Digital Talent Program, all the kind of big initiatives that are going on at the moment actually came up through the summit.
Conversations in the Connected Summit is, as you said, between private sector, public sector, and end users. And we typically have a lot of very interesting platforms and forums where we discuss topical issues which actually affect people on the ground. That's then taken up and made into policy where it makes sense. So, like you're saying, the Presidential Digital Talent Program came from there, and that has been largely very successful. And so we're very excited to, as Telkom, to be sponsoring the 10th year of Connected. And like you said, this year is different. It's going to be in Nairobi because we realize that sometimes when you take it to Mombasa, not everybody can come there. In Nairobi, it's more accessible. And we've taken it to the Bomas this time. Bomas is very big. It can accommodate people.
All right, gentlemen, I have to pause there because that music means I want